Now we're recording. I'm hoping that, okay. Hold on a minute. Okay, good. So now it is 7:04:59, 7:05, and this is the August 11th meeting of the Stormwater Mitigation and Implementation Committee. And those present are myself, Jennifer Wallace, Bob Douglas, Jim Moore, and Greg Day. We're hoping that our other member, Steve Smith, will be able to join us. So here we are. I think you guys all had a chance to review our agenda for today. Should I review it real quick, or do you have a sense of what we're about? Okay, I'm not hearing Greg or Jim. You can nod. Okay, all right, I'll review it. So we're going to review and approve the minutes from June 25th and July 1st. And we are going to briefly talk about the municipal vulnerability program application. We don't have an update on that yet, but we have some things that are going to come up later in the agenda when we talk about our charge that will be related to that. So I'll just give a brief overview for those of you who weren't part of that process before. We'll look together at our charge. I don't know if we just lost Bob or he just turned his camera off. The select board charge, so that we're familiar with what our tasks are to be, especially the first phase. We'll have a discussion of, given our charge and what we may have reviewed, and we can review that together tonight too, where we would like to start and kind of, carve out a kind of game plan for our work this year. That I'm sure will be, I'll send that to you once we talk about it, and then we'll revisit that often, or just see how that all is feeling to us, so that we have they're not just meetings for meeting's sake, but that we have some tasks that we're going to be trying to complete this year. I do need to give a quarterly report to the select board every quarter of our progress and what we're doing. So that's a good thing too, to have that. Also on the agenda will be our discussion of the 11 GZA priority sites. Jim was able to meet with the engineers when they were walking on the west side, and I have received an update from them on what their impressions were walking on Shore Road, so we can share that and then decide if we want to actually go and see each of these sites or not. Many of us have seen them already, but we might want to do that as a committee. And lastly, we have to, in the charge, we need to make decisions about staggering our terms. And Gail Fleischbacher has proposed a method for doing that, which has worked well for other committees. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll set the next meeting date. So are there any other late additions to our agenda? I don't know if we're really allowed to do that. So it looks like we have one person here who's not part of the committee, and that's Liz Goodsell. Her camera is off and her mic too. Liz, I want to give you the chance to make a comment during this early period of our meeting, if you have any. Okay, does anyone know Liz Goodsell? No, okay. All right, well, we'll see. She might drop in some way. All right, so let's go to item number 1. And let me just write down here that we called the meeting to order at 7:05. Okay, so this is the review of the minutes of 6/25/26. That was our meeting with GZA, where they reviewed their 10 priority sites and our Q&A with them about how that came about, and our discussion about site number 4, which is the Randall Road site. I don't know that much else was. And then, we talked about game plan for seeing if they would add an 11th site and what we would do if they didn't, but then they were kind enough to say, yeah, sure, we'll do 11 sites. So that's the rough summary of what happened in 625 on 625. Did anyone see anything glaringly missing from those minutes? Okay, so anyone want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I will make a motion to move the approve the minutes
Okay,
of that
any
meeting.
seconds?
Second.
Okay, good. So, well, I'll approve them too. Jennifer Wallace, aye. Bob,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Greg.
Aye.
Okay. Okay, same thing goes for our last meeting, July 1st. And yeah, it was July 1st. So that was one where we pretty much reviewed what our decision was about the, the 11th site. I think there were some other items on there too. I hadn't hit the transcript button, so those were totally recollected. And I appreciate anyone that found something that I might have missed, because it was a pretty bare bones summary. But anything in there that needs to be brought to everybody's attention? All right, so then someone want to make a motion to approve those?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, any seconds?
I'll second the
Okay,
motion.
Jim, thanks. Okay, so Jennifer Wallace, aye. Bob,
In favor, aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Greg.
Aye.
Okay. All right. Now this municipal, the MVP program, and Bob can give us, like an overview, I'm sure, of the purpose of the MVP program. We were encouraged to apply for the grant last year. I think we had to submit our application in, I think it was September maybe. And so based on our conversations with the Stormwater Task Force and the guidance from our FERCOG representative, we felt that it was, while GZA's study was going on, if we could apply for a grant that was geared toward planning processes, and especially toward capacity building for multiple stakeholders, because once that engineering study is completed and different design proposals are proposed, there will be some things that will need to be implemented exclusively by the town on town roads, and some things that would need to be implemented by the association. There'll be some things that will need to be implemented by private property owners. And then we have the state DCR too. So the premise of that application was to get some funding to facilitate, sessions and meetings and preparation for all these stakeholders working together. The second component of it was a big public education component to spread the word about the impacts of stormwater erosion on the lake's health itself, and things that individuals can do, things that municipalities can do, things that homeowners associations can do. So we haven't heard yet. FERCOG people had told me that we usually don't hear until sometime in August when the budget has been approved, the state budget. But Jim, you had sent me a little note or contact. When we were at that other meeting, you had said you wanted to bring up the idea of education. It turns out that that is a part of our charge.
Mhm.
And it's something that we had identified in the task force. Let's see. Our charge here says, it's under the long-term stewardship part of our charge, which says, establish a resident education and outreach program to promote best management practices for erosion control on private property. I think there's also education about working together with multiple stakeholders. But Jim, since we're just on this education part as it relates to MVP, if we got the grant, it would fund a lot of different education type programs that we could do. And I know that the planning, what was it, Franklin County Planning did a workshop on culverts and brought town residents together, served a meal, did some, facilitating of discussion and mapping of things that people were familiar with. The grant would help us do those kinds of things too.
Mhm.
But Jim, so share with us your thoughts on education.
Well, I was just trying to get something together to move quickly. So I was thinking of basically repeating last summer's session on that we had at the association house, but this time doing it perhaps at the new library for the town to open it up to wider participation, possibly. Or, and I do think the librarian would be quite open to that. Or the Shutesbury Athletic Club as another location with maybe a different, slightly different population.
That's great. So Greg, what we were able to do last summer is, and we were working closely with FERCog, who had a technical assistance grant to work with Shutesbury. So we staged a kind of watershed advocacy day. And they have a couple of really great sort of stream tables and models of what happens when stormwater pours down on a watershed. And it's actually a material that's kind of like granular. So you can watch it wash down in places, and you can put houses right on places where the houses would get flooded. You can really simulate a big storm event. Bob created a model of 3 different kinds of filtration. So what would happen if stormwater went like straight on an impervious surface, and what would happen if it is part of more of a vegetated area, and how the water gets cleaned with various treatments. I think I got that right, Bob. Something like that. and we had 2 stream tables. So there wasn't a great turnout, but there were people who weren't part of our committee that came. And I think that's a great idea. And FERCog had said at the time that they're willing to lend us those stream tables.
Mhm.
Those were
So-
very, very fun and popular too.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Jim, that doing it at the library and or at the athletic club. Someone mentioned doing it at the elementary school, as part of a, we used to do this ages ago with pond water and bring it in, put it in the tables, the kindergarten tables that used to be sandbox tables. They removed all that sand. We put the pond water and the little creatures from the pond in there for the day, and the classrooms rotated and could explore, what's living under the leaf litter in a pond. We had aeration and all things, and then we returned everybody to where they needed to go. But that was super popular, and I learned from someone who participated. I'm talking about decades ago. She participated in that and ended up pursuing her master's degree in, pond ecology. So, things like that can make a definite impact. And it also helps us to stay organized and on the radar in the community, in the town, as far as what we're about. So I think maybe on that score, I could reach out to Tamsin at FERCog again, if you guys are in favor of this idea, see if we can get those tables. And Bob has
Sign
his
me up.
models, or they're easy enough to reproduce, and see if we can get on the schedule there at the library. Is
I
that
would
good?
support contacting FERCog.
Yeah. Okay. All right, great. So I'll make a note to do that. All right, so here we have where to begin our work and our charge as a committee. And it's a long bunch of documents, but I think the important thing is the first phase of the committee's work centers on Lake Wyola. And then the kinds of things that we're meant to be attending to are related to things that were in our Stormwater Task Force report. The first part of it, project adoption and prioritization, I think will rely on the GZA engineering study to be completed before we can do anything on that, as far as things around the lake goes. Same thing with engineering, permitting, and design. The select board wants us to have an active role in doing these things and, coordinating these things, but they don't exist just yet.
Mhm.
Funding, acquisition, and management, we could begin to research. I mean, GZA is going to give us a set of recommendations, and they're going to give us a set of conceptual designs. And finding the funds, prioritizing those, and then finding the funds to implement those, whether they're on town properties or other properties. I mean, that is something we can get ourselves in position to do if we choose to make that a first phase priority. What else jumped out? Yes, Jim.
Oh, okay. I think it came up in perhaps the last meeting, of how long would it take for us to find out how long it would take to go from the conceptual proposal to the, I think the phrase used then was shovel in the ground proposal,
Right.
of just how, what sort of gap we might be running into there. Are we talking about a couple months, or is it really going to be write a grant to get the, funds to build it type of gap? So just so we could prepare ourselves for what sort of struggle we're in.
Do you think it would be useful to ask Rosalie if they had a sample of what a conceptual design looks like in another project, something that they might have done for somebody else?
If we could get both, we could see the difference. I'd suggest that to get the conceptual and then the more detailed, well, ready to build, type of.
Right. So my understanding from having talked with them in the past is that, let's just say we're talking about the town of Shutesbury now and some infrastructure they want to propose for Locks Pond Road. They would have the conceptual design, the location. Also, Leslie told me some of the sizing of things that would all be in the conceptual design. But then the next step would be to do the RFP and seek out the contractors who would then say, here's how we would go about doing this, and here's what our cost estimate would be.
Mhm.
I don't know if that would be GZA, and that they're the engineers, not the builders of the infrastructure. They probably would guide us. But I think the question that I don't have clarity on is my assumption right? that that's the way it would go? And I think what I'm hearing you say, Jim, is that how can we position ourselves to be ready once we get their report?
Right. More specifically would be, do we need to put together the grant that would be a request for proposals for the companies? Do we have to get to that point before we can begin to think of actually, on the ground project? Or is there, we're all new to this, but is there some looser step that we can move on?
Right. And Bob, maybe you have feedback on the municipal vulnerability program, because some of those projects are infrastructure projects, or at least the Rural Development Fund had infrastructure projects. And so that funding requires another set of kinds of submissions than just conceptual designs. So do you have a sense, Bob, of what happens, what would have to get submitted to a grant for actually building infrastructure best management practices?
Sure, yeah, and I like that you use the word building, because it is kind of an incremental step. It kind of begins with a group such as ours, where we have professionals identify the issues and come up with possible solutions, and then generally armed with that information, another grant is applied for through MVP or something similar, and then we've got the backup. So I see this as a building process where we go step by step, and we're we are in an important phase now.
Mhm. So, I mean, I think the best thing for us to start to get a handle on, like I said, is for me to be touching base with Rosalie and saying, you know, we're part of what we want to do is to be preparing ourselves for what happens when your recommendations are made. And, you know, what does that really look like? What should that look like for us? And see if she has some ideas. And they also have a grant writing arm at GZA where they're
Right?
able to help us with that. So
That sounds like a really uh, a well thought out course. Um, uh, we know the direction that we're headed. We all want to see things get better. I think uh, having the professionals look at it and give us, an engineering study, and then advancing those as the next, if we choose to, advancing those as the next step in reaching out for another grant. Generally, consultants like GCA and others that have worked in town have done this before in other municipalities, and it's often good for us to lean on them as far as guidance is concerned.
mhm. Does that get close to what you were curious about, Jim?
Oh, yes, right on.
Okay, good. All right, so let me reach out to Rosalie. That'll be a start, and just see if I can get a sense of what the flow is from their design to the various steps to construction. Let's
Okay.
say.
One more thing with regard to the chronological framework
Mhm.
is, to what extent do we need to figure out how we dance with the dam repair folks?
Right.
It probably is useful for whoever's putting together the dam repair proposal to be aware of what we're up to so they can incorporate parts of it with their proposal.
That's
It also
great.
would be nice to know what their temporal framework is.
Yeah, that's a great observation. And also, as was announced on Saturday, you know, that there'll be another drawdown in 2028, and that if permitting is needed, it's good to get that permitting process. This is for property owners, but it could be more broad than that. Get that started in 2027. So I think coordinating with the dam repair and the drawdown schedule could be really, really important. And important for however we might put out an RFP for proposals for us to coordinate that with the drawdown schedule too. So good suggestion. Okay, so now I have some other things that are on this charge. I don't know whether, I think maybe I'll just share that, okay? I'm going to share the recommendations. Well, first I have to do this, hang on. Share. And then, oh, I don't like to use that Adobe. Okay, can you see this? Task force recommendations has a lot of red on it.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so this is a page from the presentation that we gave to the select board last summer, I guess. And so these are the recommendations that we gave to them, and they have now said, okay, now your job, the SMIC committee, is follow up on these recommendations. So I think we can decide we're going to take these on this year, or we're going to take them partially on. The first is to adopt, the engineering studies. We've done that. Research alternative funding for engineering, as well as for infrastructure implementation. So we don't need the funding for engineering because we got that through the Rural Development Fund, but this is the bit that we were just discussing. how do we get positioned for pursuing funding for infrastructure implementation? So I think that for sure is going to be part of our work this year, and getting the chronological time frame down will be the beginning of that. Anything, I mean, do you guys agree? I'm just talking a lot here, but seems like starting to look at funding for implementation should be a priority of ours this year.
Mhm.
Okay. Public education, we've already decided we're going to try and get started with that soon. This is one that was suggested by FERCog, and it's a little tricky because so many are involved. FERCog observed in the watershed report that they did that water and sedimentation that comes down into Lake Wyola is coming from so many different places over so many different kinds of properties owned by different stakeholders, and that having a plan where everyone has signed on to this plan is of immense benefit. And our task force agreed and suggested that the development of such a plan could be something that our group did, that the SMIC group did. Greg, was that a question? Oh, I thought your hand
Just
was.
rolling up my sleeves.
Hmm?
Just rolling up my sleeves.
Okay, okay. So this is a big job to do an operation and management plan. I'm wondering how we feel about taking that on as a task. That could be a whole year's work.
Yeah.
That is quite a loaded thing.
Mhm.
There are many different players, and that would have to agree on it. So that is, as far as being done at a volunteer level, I think that's going to be pretty tricky, and a high expenditure of time, and I think difficult to get going.
Yeah, I agree with Bob. I think
Yeah.
that if we could get grant money, the whole thing would get much easier to if we could promise some assistance for all these different groups on moving on these issues.
So as you're talking, I'm thinking this is a very specific thing that would fit in very well with this MVP grant if we got it, because that's going to fund a facilitator, for example, who could pull together these meetings and bring these different parties together and get the whole planning process, sort of grounded. And if it was through a consultant, let's say, that would get hired with the MVP funding, then there's no one stakeholder that's got all the power. And we're hammering this out together as a group, because the whole premise has really been that, it's a system-wide problem, and we need to create systems that are flexible enough to accommodate, planning things when we all might have different interests at certain points or different approaches. So it could be that if we get the MVP grant, we say, we're going to focus that, in addition to education, on creating this plan.
Mhm. I could also
Thought?
see us.
Go
Sorry.
ahead, Greg, and then Jim.
Yeah. I just as a volunteer, this sounds like the kind of thing where if I knew what sort of model we were aiming for, like other examples of places that have implemented something like this, something that I could learn from, I would be happy to learn about it, and I would also be happy to teach other people about what I'd learned about it. Like, I think that's the kind of work conceptually that I could take on in terms of an OMP. Otherwise, I completely agree with what Bob and Jim said.
Mm-hmm. I'll ask FERCog about that, since that was their recommendation to begin with. Jim.
Hmm.
I was just, since there are the 10 subbasins, And
11, now we're up to 11.
11, sorry. That they might be addressable as separate entities, that I would kind of expect the proposals for the best practices to vary from, and that addressing them one at a time with the concerned parties might be easier than to try to get a group of people to agree in the abstract about this sort of organization, so that if we could get one or a couple sub-basins proposals developed and get buy-in, at that point we might be much more attractive for having other committees join in with forming a larger organization.
I think that makes sense too. The benefit, and I don't think they're mutually exclusive, because the benefit of having sort of a team that is prepared and in place to work together. For example, let's say there's a best management practice infrastructure that's put in up on Watson Straits on Wendell Road. And that's partially going to handle things, but that there needs to be a downstream thing to support that. So then that would be either a private property owner or the association. So that in order for that particular sub-basin's sedimentation to be addressed, you would need two parties. But what I'm thinking too is that that's very attractive to funding people, the people who give funding, that we have, joint relationships and people who are ready to ensure that different things are going to happen. So, but I agree with you too, that waiting to see, well, what are these recommendations that are going to come from the engineering firm, and how many of them are going to ask for some coordination between upstream and downstream installations or maintenance items and things like that is really smart. So maybe we can do a two-part thing. First of all, it sounds like it's get some examples from FERCog of other coordinated operation and management plans so that we could see, well, what does this really look like? 2, wait to get the conceptual designs from GZA and look at when and where some kind of cooperation among stakeholders is required. Does that capture that sense pretty well?
Better put than I said, but yes, that's what I was trying for.
Okay.
We arrived at it together.
Right. Yeah, you need all of us. Okay, so then next item on this recommendation list is to ensure, well, this is here, this exists, this is us, right? Ensure the continuation of the work begun by the task force by creating a management stormwater committee. So that's done. All right. Now there was another set. I'm gonna get rid of this document. How do I do that?
Can we just go back to 5, please?
Oh yeah, okay, hang on. Oh, I keep doing that. Okay, there's 5.
The sub items, the small letters here of is there any discussion we can have about how to establish coordination with CONSCOM, given their first response? And LWAC is kind of in flux, as we know, so that one tough. I was just going to decompose those G different items and see if we could act on any of them.
Right. So I think we're routinely, I am anyway, routinely liaising. Is that, can I make a verb out of liaison? Can I liaising? Is that a
liaising? Yes. Okay.
Liaising.
I think that works. Yeah.
Between our committee and the town and the association, in that I share, we have a representative from the association who is our liaison. So at the end of meetings, I usually inform her of, what our status is, what we've talked about, the things we're working on. And also I make presentations to the board all the time and to general membership meetings. Same things with Concom. I used to do LWAC too. So I think there's a pretty established precedent of interacting with them. Same with the
Okay.
engineering studies, we're doing that. Researching additional funding, we've talked about when and how to get that started. This is the next thing I was going to show you about is these short-term projects. We've always said that while we do have to wait for the engineering studies and this longer process for infrastructure, that there is a lot of work that can be done to reduce sedimentation that can be started now at smaller scales. And I think that's what I read to help and develop annual projects that can be followed up on now in advance of any big fundraising schemes. I think that's our job to identify what those projects might be.
Okay.
Water quality testing, I've forgotten totally about. And that's also something that we can start to pursue. It's not about sedimentation. It may be that that gets put on the back burner until we see what kind of LWAC charge gets created. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that I'm a bit vague on what the water quality testing, how intense or, we know of the state beach gets tested all the time. The um, association beaches, the three of them, I think, do get once a week tests and the results turned into the town. Do we want to hook in to those tests, or are we willing to let good enough alone?
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
Madam Chair, and I appreciate Jim bringing that up because my curiosity was water quality testing can mean a lot of things. It can mean how much, what the nutrients from fertilizers or septic systems are going to the pond, encouraging eutrophication. It could mean the actual sediment that is blanketing the bottom of the pond, or as Jim is referring to, fecal coliform is tested at the swimming beaches or as the state puts in bathing beaches. So um, those water quality testing can mean a lot of different things.
right. And I think the thing that would be relevant to what we're doing are just those kind of things like phosphorus, turbidity, and sedimentation, the effects on plant growth as the water clarity is less, and then what happens to sunlight and plant growth under those circumstances. I think if we had water quality testing as something that we were trying um, to develop, where there is no program for that. There used to be. Mark Rivers used to go out in his boat and do a couple of basic water quality tests. And he even had a team of students from UMass who were doing the data analysis and had assembled data over several years. If somehow we were able to reinstitute that or pursue funding to reinstitute that or get UMass people involved again in helping to do that, it could be useful since our role is to look at the effects of sedimentation on the lake itself. So I kind of agree that doing some kind of water testing as it relates to sedimentation, which is different than E. coli, that would be a good thing to take a further look at. And I can again try to learn more about how especially the effects of sedimentation on water quality and what kind of tests are done. I can obtain more information about that, and we could see where that fits in our game plan.
I'd be curious about that.
Is the engineering report I've just fallen into the habit of thinking about it being high volume rainfall and erosion and sedimentation. But does it at all consider other sorts of pollution?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's looking at, rates of water, sediment traveling to the lake based on those drainage systems.
Mhm.
And again, I think I would need to, we could all do that, but I'm happy to just go right back to the source, to FERCog, and learn more, because their report had a lot of different water testing data in there from over the years.
Yes.
And we could take a look at that and decide where that wants to fit in some kind of, ongoing work that we do, or that the town or some version of us does to coordinate water quality with actual physical sedimentation that's traveling to the lake, the impacts of that. Because you know what, that could help with the fundraising too. Like if we're trying to put, for example, it's not far-fetched to think that if there is a lot of sediment that's coming from a certain drainage area and it's collecting in the lake in a certain place, that then wildlife is affected there in that particular place, whether it's just sedimentation or sedimentation plus some kind of pollutant. I know that the little cove there near my house and behind Shore Drive, it's just a narrow little cove, was identified at one point as the breeding grounds of this famed brindled shiner. And so if it turns out that, things that are happening in Watson Strait and from Wendell Road are drifting down there and affecting water quality besides just sedimentation, then you have maybe not, it's not officially endangered, but a threatened creature. And there could be funding to help us deal with that.
Well, that's thinking on the other end of the process of, are there any areas on the slopes above the lake where there may be concentrations that we would want to make certain don't get into the lake? So places where old mills had been located, or those sorts of things that we could think about containment of some sort. But I mean, that only comes from, at one point, I thought, again, I'm kind of a newbie here, so only 6 years. But discussions about the cove and clearing out the cove, the North Cove, and running into problems of possible pollution of the sediments in the cove, putting up basically a halt to most everything is what I've been told. I don't know how true that is, but I've been told such a thing. But
let me see if I can learn more about that, and I'll report back to us at our next meeting. Okay, so there's two other. So are we done with number 5 here? I think so.
yes.
Okay, so these are recommendations also that were in our report that are a little bit smaller scale. Some of these were relevant to the highway department. Some of these are relevant to the Lake Wyola Association only. Some are relative to both organizations working together. And I'm wondering if maybe the idea with this, so what this says here is that these are recommendations for addressing current conditions that were identified by FERCog as needing attention. And so our group just assembled those, right? And then tried to designate different responsible parties for dealing with those. I think we could take it as, if our charge is to follow up on some of these recommendations, is, send a note to the highway department and say, these were recommendations that were made last year, and we're wondering what your plans or policy is for these kinds of things, assessing ditches on Locks Pond across from Great Pines and Lake. You know, does that happen? I don't know if that happens. Consider closing the culvert at the opening of Watson Straits. Is that being considered? Is any, you know, like what's the status? I guess we could say one of the first things we'll do is check with these organizations to see what the status is.
Right. And well, you did point out that there were a couple properties uphill of of Locks Pond Road where sediment was washing out onto the road
Right.
of Locks Pond from their driveways, so that um, I guess we could talk to the road department about, since they're probably in charge of that enforcement, or um, of something I would hope would be relatively easy to address.
Yeah, and I don't think that's new news to them that
Yeah.
this happens. So maybe the best thing how to address these is to think that we might send a correspondence to the highway department regarding their items and the association regarding their items, and just get like a current status report. Like, what's the update on these? How do they fit into your priorities? Just find out where they stand. I mean, some things I think I've been cautioning to delay certain things like installing water bars. You know, let's just wait to see what these engineering studies, what kind of best management practices they're going to propose,
Yeah.
rather than make a big investment on things like that. Monitoring, you know, I think it would be a good thing for us to visit these sites, especially after storms, and look at, well, what currently is going on there? You know, what are we observing now a year later?
Mhm.
Jim, is this a good time to talk about what you discovered with the GZA people as you walk the roads on the west side?
Um, well, if you mean, I did take the GZA people when we were on Great Pine and walk down Birch Drive, and because I was aware that there's a water runoff problem. The water does take a turn off of Great Pines and down Birch, and there's a basin, a dead ice landscape, depression that every spring fills with water. So that I made them aware of that, and they actually said that it might not have shown up on the LIDAR topography. So we did talk about that. We did walk through um, Randall, and I did point out, that unfortunately the water level is up, and you can't see the really poor condition of the underwater of the boat launch. There's really a problem there, and they had done um, the a good bit of the walk before I caught up to them. So I don't know what if they've noticed anything there. Um, and I mean, the only thing is that I was going to send a note to the association about Lake Drive at right above the retention pond. We're probably can get by unless there's another big storm, at which point there'll be a problem. So that needs some attention.
That's a good thing that you mentioned that, and I would say it's a timely time to be in touch with them, because I met this morning with George and showed him the sedimentation levels increasing on the ditches and the retention pond on Pine. And
Mhm.
so he's got that, and said he was going to talk to their contractor about coming to take a look, and especially to see in that location, there are a lot of trees on the edges, and having big equipment in there could compromise the health of those trees. So only to say that I know it's on his mind now, and he's going to be talking to their contractor about.
I'll text him tonight after the
Yeah,
meeting.
good idea. Because and say we met and that I mentioned that he was working
Timely.
on that. Yeah. I talked to Leslie, the engineer from GZA, and what she said, and we didn't spend a lot of time on Lake because I knew you had some things you were gonna say. But she said that the main thing that was beneficial to them, because there was so much, had been so much rainfall, is that they were able much more clearly to see what she called the flow paths.
Mhm.
And she could see where water was trying to cut through places, and that the placement of berms and cutouts, they could evaluate if those placements were effective. And in some places, the water wanted to go to other places than where the berms and the cutouts were.
Mhm.
She talked about that they are looking at how to slow down the water on Locks Pond Road, that is going to be part of what they're going to be looking at. On Shore Road and those systems, she talked about culvert repairs, sizing the ditches, velocities of water down the hill, and check dams, as well as deep sump pumps on the way to the lake, are things that they talked about, and then maintenance that would have to be on a consistent schedule. So this is like this is like words just now. It's not, the engineers haven't come down, okay, we're definitely going to do this, but these are all things they looked at. And she talked about an integrated system of swales, berms, and things like sump pumps, deep sump pumps, things that are all designed to work together. And rather than individual solutions all the way up and down the road, the solutions are all part of a plan.
Mhm.
I'm just looking at my notes here. Oh, and then she said, well, lakes are going to fill in. It's, you're concerned about the speed of the filling in that I think that you're really concerned about. She also said that GZA has a very strong mission and philosophy and approach that all involves doing their designs with nature. And so that's going to be like a big envelope that their recommendations are wrapped in. So that was what I got from her.
Well, that would be if they could educate us so that we could do our education sessions from that perspective of what designing with nature would mean rather than um, ditching from this property onto the road, which seems to be.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, I'd also like to see like what they produce, and get a feel for how I interpret that as working with the environment
Mhm.
versus what they would call that.
Mhm. And Bob, do you have experience with this? Is this like a thing, designs with nature? Is that like a concept that is like best management practices, that everybody knows what that means, designs with nature? Is that more particular to GZA, do you think?
Yeah, I've never heard that specific phrase, but what it calls to mind is a best management practice where you would have a rain garden where water would come and settle, drop out its sediments, and then advance, either soak into the ground, or after it's dropped, it's said, move the water then moves onto the lake. So that's what I picture in my mind, but it'd be interesting to hear what they would flesh that out as.
Okay. Well, I'll reach out to them and see if they have some information for us and examples of that. Now it's getting to be 8 o'clock. I think maybe I'm going to propose that I try to convert our conversation about the Stormwater Task Force recommendations that we just looked at, the ones in red and these, and send that out as kind of a draft, working document of how we might start to approach our work this year. And then we can weigh in on that, at our next meeting, maybe. I don't know that there's, other than maybe trying to get the library on board as far as a good time to have dates for things. Probably it would be after the summer if we were doing a watershed program, I would think, maybe in September. When everyone's back at school, and teachers can be involved and stuff like that. But well, we'll set our next meeting date. But does that make sense? That I try to just collate some of these thoughts and put it into a draft, kind of like, here's our game plan for the year.
Yeah, that
Great.
sounds
For me.
wonderful.
Okay. All right, so I'll do that. We're coming down to the last three things on our agenda. They're very quick. So do we think that we have the time or want to take the time or need to take the time to visit these 11 drainage sites? Or do we wait till we get more like, okay, here's the plan, and then we go look at these sites? Greg.
So I'm thinking about it in terms of like documentation. Has like each of these sites, I'm thinking probably should have some sort of dossier or something like that where we can keep track of it, and maybe we can store those files on like alongside Shutesbury's website or some other place where we could use with a little bit of town resources. And so in light of that, going to these places and just taking our own photographs like for reference, or taking some notes and putting those there even before we have an assessment from GCA could be useful. But I also think, it's our town. We can go to these places as often as we want. So I vote visiting some of these sites because I also have not seen them. I live down the hill.
Mhm.
I would love a tour of the Waiala area. So that's just me personally.
Okay, how about anyone else want to weigh in on that?
Sure, I'd be happy to accompany Greg on that so that since I seemingly have built up enough visits around the lake that I kind of know the points of interest.
Yeah, and I'd like to go. I mean, we could split that, Jim, and you could do the west side, I could do the east side, or we could all go to all the places.
I'd love to hear your take on the Shore Road area in Pine, so that the places I know, but the places I
Yeah,
don't.
right. Okay. So yeah, maybe I'll in some correspondence that I'll send to you all after our meeting, I'll propose a date. Maybe 2 dates for the site visits, because it would be a lot to, we could burn out on trying to do all 11 in one day. But let me propose a couple of days that would be good to do that. Instead of picking one and then having a rain date, we should have the rain date first. But I don't know if we could predict that.
Yeah, it's looking pretty clear the next couple of weeks, but then,
Yeah, right.
so inaccurate after that.
Okay, we'll get to
Oh
it. So
no, rain next week
I'll
now.
propose a couple of dates for that.
That would be great. My personal schedule is that the next 2 weeks are good, but after that, my grandchildren are visiting, and it might be difficult to free myself from them.
Okay, and how about work schedule? Greg, is there a day or a time of day that's best for you?
As long as I know ahead of time, I can pretty much always step away.
Okay,
I did mention I am getting work done on the house, but my wife is home, so I can come out and it's no big deal. So consider me
let me see if
basically
I
wide
can,
open.
let me see if I could find something that we can do in the next couple of weeks before Jim's grandkids come.
That'd be great.
Okay,
Thank you.
so the second to the last thing is in the charge. I'm gonna share this on the screen too, I think. In the charge, we are meant to stagger our terms. And that seemed confusing to me how that's done. But apparently that is done. It's frequently done to not have everyone on the same schedule so that there's some consistency. And on this document that I'm sharing with you, this was a proposal from the town assistant town administrator, and Gail, who I forget exactly what Gail's role is for the town, but she interacts with all of our minutes and posts all the websites. And she
Mhm.
suggested this as what would happen, I guess, was in the first 3 years, there would be shorter terms for certain positions. And then after the 3 years, everybody gets a 3-year term. So she said 3-year terms to the chair and the next most knowledgeable person in order to secure continuity of process and memory. So she suggested me and Steve as the former highway department person who knows all about the roads as having the first, we would each get 3 years from the get-go. Then there'd be a 1-term year for you, Greg. Why, I'm not sure, but she said that ECAC stepped up right away to propose a representative, and she knows that they have a great interest in the work of this committee, and she's sure that they'll always reappoint someone. And then the other 2 people on our committee would get 2-year terms. I have no sense of whether that makes sense or not, or how we want to do it. It's up to us how we want to do it, but we do have to stagger our terms apparently.
Okay, just a point of order and information. I am not a representative of LWA. I have
Okay.
no position on the board of LWA. Just
Good.
I'll make sure
someone who
Gail
knows
knows
how to
that.
use the shovel.
Okay, we will correct that.
Yep. And for me, I mean, a 1-year term is fine. Very likely that it will be me again.
Mhm.
I'm planning on sticking around.
Good. Well, yeah, and I think it's good to have consistency. And then does anyone want to sign on with me to be a 3-year person? Or do you guys like the idea of having the flexibility of having it be 2 years or 1 year for that matter?
I can understand from a management standpoint why this initial staggering has to take place, and I'm fine with it for my with a 2-year term, hopefully to be renewed when that rolls around.
Mhm. Are you okay with that too, Jim?
Fine, yes.
Okay. It's odd, because so Stephen would be the person who is here with the institutional memory, but he's not at the meeting. So I will have to talk to him about that. And if he's up for a 3-year term, if not, we might revisit this next time. Does that sound fair?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good.
I should mention I do have a strong objection to having the extra S on the end of my name.
Oh, where is that? Oh, I see that. Yes, I understand why you would have that objection. I'll make sure Gail knows that and that you're not printed on our webpage with that name.
Okay, I appreciate
She wrote all that up. I'm going to blame it on her.
it.
Yeah,
Okay. All right, good.
she can take it.
So I will touch base with Steve, but otherwise report those designations to them. And the last thing is to set a next meeting date. I don't know how often we want to meet. I mean, when we were with the Stormwater Task Force, I can stop sharing now.
Mhm.
Although this is a total aside, but hold on a minute. You see this cool waterfall here?
Yeah, I was wondering if that was
Yeah.
your house this spring during that flood.
No, so we were in
Quite a sight.
Norway and we went on this long hike to a place that was called the Troll Church. And you walk through this deep tunnel, dark as all get out, all rocks, pointy rocks all over, maybe, like a 1/8 of a mile walk through this cave. And
Wow,
then you get to this underground waterfall and pool.
that sounds spectacular.
It's so inspiring to me. So that's why it's on my screen. Okay. So we met about once a month. And and we maybe met more frequently when we needed to, like if we needed to do something, we'd say, okay, we better have a meeting in 2 weeks or something. We could wait a month for me to present this draft of our game plan for the year. I don't know that there's, a lot of timing pressures that say to do it before a month, but yet if we want to try to get some things set up with the library and with FERCog, we might need to be meeting before that. So I'm with you
Yeah.
guys. I want us to be effective, but I don't want us to burn out.
Mm.
Well, I think a lot of stuff is kind of on your shoulders right now, Jen. So, do you want to, I don't know, maybe we should figure out who's going to do what, or if you're just going to, if you're going to do all that work for us. Just calling it out because,
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I think if because I was involved in making that presentation to the select board and writing those recommendations, I mean, the task force weighed in on everything, but I'm
mhm.
pretty familiar with them in the big picture. I think if I'm able to draft this game plan of our work, then we'll know what our work is, and maybe different people can take on different parts of what that work is, whatever,
Yeah,
researching
it would
water
be easier
quality
to,
or, yeah.
it's always
So,
easier to share the load when you know what the load is.
yeah, exactly. Um, and especially if I can organize that work plan so that it comes down to the most granular levels, like, these are actual work tasks, not just, you know, big ideas about the work, but what work actually needs to get done.
Yeah, then we're
So,
talking.
then what, should we do that, in 3 weeks? Should we do that in 2 weeks? I know
Yeah,
Jim's gonna start going back to school pretty soon too.
yeah, I would say 3 or 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe first week or second week of September.
Okay, I'm gonna shoot for 3 weeks. But I am gonna propose some site visit dates that would come up within the next 2 weeks. I'll just do that in an email.
Great.
And then now I know we're trying to avoid Thursdays if possible because Bob has Concom meetings that aren't always pre-scheduled that far in advance, what the dates are. So we were picking Wednesdays as a possible good night, but not if there's other things that are regular things that take up Wednesday time. And Bob, I think you do have some Wednesdays that are out, right?
Yeah, I work on a boat on Wednesdays, and if it's good weather, then I won't be able to make it. But if it's storming, I can be here. But so
So
that's
see, now Tuesday would conflict with select board meetings, but I can pick dates that are not select board meetings. If Tuesday's a good day, Monday is possible, you guys tell me. I'm generally pretty available. I don't have a lot of conflicts, except for that I do like to attend those select board meetings. And I do like to attend a Concom meeting when I have to, so, or when I want to.
Yeah,
So what do we
I'm
think?
pretty open. So
Tuesdays or Mondays?
Not Monday.
Not Monday. Okay.
Tuesday okay for everybody?
Tuesday works.
Okay, so I'm gonna look for a Tuesday date. I mean, right now I could say if we do, I'm putting my calendar up here. This is Tuesday, 1, 2. So that would be September 1st. For now, just tentatively, I'm going to say September 1st at 7. I'll follow that up in a correspondence with you with some of the other things we talked about. So anything else? Anything else that you think we really need to pay attention to get started?
I just wanted to bring up one thing that I wanted to just make sure that people are aware. So um, after each of these meetings, I'll take a little summary to the Concom during the Concom meeting, and it'll just be an item to report on. So if there's any communication from them, I will bring it back to this group. And if there's anything you want me to highlight for them to take a look at, feel free to contact me during the meeting or otherwise, and I'm happy to share that with the Concom at any time.
Good.
Sounds good.
And I'll do the
Jen,
same with our liaison to the association too. I share all
I
of
just
our
wanted
updates.
to,
Go ahead, Greg.
sorry,
No,
I
go
think
ahead.
I have some latency or something. Just wanted to say that the ECAC, the next scheduled ECAC meeting is scheduled on the 1st, so I have a conflict
Oh,
for
okay.
that date.
That's always going to happen, I
Um,
guess.
I can see if I can get ECAC to go like an hour earlier in the day. That might work.
Try that. I mean, I think 7 is a good time for us, especially because I know Steve is working and he has much more constricted
Mhm.
work schedule as far as when he's available for meetings.
Okay. I'll let you know
Okay.
once I contact ECAC and see if we can change our meeting.
Oh, that's great. Thanks.
Hmm.
And same thing, Bob saying about his role in, facilitating back and forth with Concom. We have a Lake Wyola Association person, and I will always be in touch with her and have the same thing, things we want to bring to them, things that they might want to bring to us. And we'll make sure those communication loops stay fluid and functional. Okay, well, someone can make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Madam
make-
Chair, I'd like to make a motion. We adjourn the meeting.
Jim, you're
Second.
gonna-
Second,
Okay, good. So
third.
8:16. And Bob, would it help you if when I collect the AI generated transcript of our meeting, to send that on to you and you could use that to focus your Concom comments, or you got a pretty good sense of what's going on?
Oh my God, yes. Please send me your AI summary, and I'll sound like a genius. So yes, please.
All right. And then if there's any glitches, you can just blame it on AI.
Yes,
It
absolutely.
does get some things. It does
Oh,
get
they
some
do.
things pretty wrong.
For sure, for sure. Okay, well, I'm really excited and glad to get started, and you'll be hearing from me.
Fantastic.
good.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Good to see you,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Take
Good
care.
night.
Okay,
Good night,
bye-bye.
guys.